Hey guys, welcome to Bourboneering Podcast. I'm your host Austin. Let's get started. Sorry I've been a little slow posting this month. It's been a busy month, so episodes are going to be dropping now, probably every other week. Try to stick to that, but it's been fun. So, all right. So today's episode, I'm talking about cocktails. Now I've done this 1,000 times on YouTube, a few times on the podcast, kind of combining these for now. But I really want to talk about something that's new to me, and that's making your own cocktail, like inventing your own cocktail, not just using a recipe and making your own old fashioned, which is great, and I love playing around with different recipes. This is making your own, kind of from scratch, and I'm gonna say scratch with a grain of salt, but you'll see in a second why. But I'm gonna talk about the process that I'm kind of using to build my own. And then let you kind of build on that. There's no one set way to build your own cocktail, obviously. Use what you have, what ingredients you have, and just play around with it. But I'm kind of go through my mindset and what I consider before making my own cocktail. So, the first thing I want to consider when making cocktail is what type of cocktail is it? Most, if not all, cocktails fall within certain categories, whether that's an old fashioned or a sour, which within a sour you have daiquiris, margaritas, whiskey sours. Those are all sours. Mules, Moscow Mule, Kentucky Mule, all that sort of thing. Juleps, very similar. Like I said, old fashions earlier. You can make rum, whiskey, old fashioned, different kind of simple old fashioned cocktail recipes. They all kind of fall into some of these categories. Now, I did not name them all. There's way more than that. Swizzles, I just saw a video on a swizzle. Different tiki drinks go, that's a completely different realm. I'm not even going to touch tiki right now. But it's just lots to play with. So it's helpful to kind of slightly narrow it down to your category. And that gives a good guidelines of your ratios. Like when you work with an old fashioned, your ingredients are going to be a base spirit, a sweetener, and a bittering agent. And that's in old fashions is generally, a simple syrup, a whiskey or rum or whatever spirit you're using, and bitters. Now, you kind of have that whiskey sour as a step up. You have the sweetening agent, which is usually simple syrup or an orange liqueur in terms of margaritas. You have a spirit, but instead of bittering, you have a souring agent. So that's going to be your lemon juice, your lime juice, what have you. So you're looking for balance. That's why it's helpful to use these kind of pre-built categories. So you know roughly what category you're working in here to balance. So working with that, it's just really everything you're making is going to be a variation off of that. And a lot of times, is that really inventing your own cocktail? Yes and no. There's 1,000 different old-fashioned recipes that I've used that change up the ratios, change up the ingredients, but still your basic spirit, simple or sugar, whether that's in simple syrup, maple syrup, what have you, and bitters. So play around with that. That's an easy way to do it, especially old-fashions. I love playing around with old-fashions. Sours are fun to play with too, using lime juice where you usually use lemon or vice versa, or using orange juice, things like that. But so once you have your category picked out, I'm gonna go along the route of let's go sours. How about that? That's a very broad category. Now you want to pick your base spirit. Your general categories, I have them in front of me if you're watching on YouTube. You have whiskey, you have vodka, you have tequila, you have rum, you have gin. I'm missing some for sure. There's different other regional spirits. There's also a bunch of liqueurs that are high enough proof that can be your base spirit. But I'm sticking with these 5 very, very broad categories. That's what I work with the most. Now, obviously, these are very broad because within each category, like within whiskey, you have American whiskey, you have Scotch, you have Canadian, Japanese, Irish. Even within American, you have bourbon, rye, wheat, corn whiskey, all that sort of good stuff. Vodka is pretty basic. They're all going to taste differently slightly, but it's kind of a very basic self-explaining category. Tequila, you have different ages. You have, Blanco tequilas, Reposado tequilas. You have Anejos, different things like that. Rum is even more broad. You have flavored rums. You have flavored whiskey too. Flavored rums. You have your white rum. You have aged rums, you have spiced rums, way different, a lot of things. A lot of good liqueurs are also rum based, interesting enough. And then gin, you have different types of gin. You have your London Dry. I'm drawing a blank on any other type of gin, but there's different gin. But even within those categories, each distillery's gin is very, very different depending on what they use to flavor the gin. So that's your base spirit. I like to start with category, what I'm feeling here, then go to what spirit I want to accent. And I like hot spirit forward cocktails, even some that aren't as spirit forward still have a good spirit backbone. So like old fashions, again, going with our example of whiskey sour, a sour. So let's mess around with a rum. Let's say I pick a white rum for our base spirit as a sour. So there's already a pre-built quote-unquote rum sour, and that's a daiquiri, and that's going to be your different ratios. People use different ratios, but for me it's 2 ounces of rum to your 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice to 1/2 ounce of simple syrup. Shake that. That's a classic kind of daiquiri. Play around with that, different flavorings and whatnot. But I want to make it different. I want to make my own. So the next level is, what are my other ingredients going to be? What's going to be my sour/bitter, and what's going to be my sweetener? As far as a sweetener will go, you have dry sugars, you have simple syrups made with those sugars, you have honey syrups, maple syrups, different really sweet liqueurs like a triple sec. That's a sweetener in a margarita usually, but would work really well with rum. Let's go with that. Let's go with an orange triple sec, which is a very sugar heavy, sweet orange liqueur. So let's call that our sweetener, right? So there, we changed it up. No longer a daiquiri. It's a rum margarita maybe at this point, because we're using the triple sec. You can call it that. You can call it something completely different. Then I'm going to look for my bitter or my sour agent. And I'm going to go with lemon because I have a bunch of lemon juice right now, and that's basically my only reason. Lime often goes, like rum is sweeter and lime is a little less sweet than lemon. So that's kind of how that works. But I'm going to go with lemon juice here. Tone down the sour and tone up the sweet just a little bit with that lemon juice. All right, so I have my ingredients for my cocktail, and I can also add bitters later. I'm thinking about adding some mango bitters or some orange bitters just to elevate that flavor. But that's kind of a side. That's kind of a garnish almost. I would call that a garnish for this single recipe. It's not a main ingredient. So I'd shake that up. But what ratio do I want to use? Do I want to stick with the normal ratio or change it up? So how I would start, I would stick with my regular daiquiri ratio, which is going to be 2 ounces of my base spirit. Then I'm going to do 3/4 of an ounce of my lemon juice instead of lime juice, and then 1/2 ounce of triple sec. I'd stick with that, taste it, see what I like about it. If I like it, if it's perfect, good. If not, is it too sweet? I will I will add less triple sec. If it's too sour, I will add less lemon juice. I like to stick with the 2 ounces of base spirit at least at first, and that's just a good starting spot. You know, if it's too boozy, add a little bit more of your other 2 ingredients rather than subtract. That's just me, because that's kind of a generic, either 1.5 or 2 ounces, kind of a generic spirit pour per drink. Stick with that. It's just more, so if you need more sweetness, add more triple sec. If there's something missing, if you think it's well balanced between the sour, the sweet, and the spirit, then that's where bitters can come into play. If you need a little bit more of a bittering agent because it's a little too sweet maybe, but not, you don't want that sour to overpower it, add just a few dashes of Ango bitters or regular aromatic bitters. Also, bitters are a whole different rabbit hole you can jump down because there's so many different flavors of bitters, experimental bitters, modern type bitters. That's a fun to play with, but I would get a base on your mixology first. So that's kind of how I make a drink, how I want to invent one. Another rabbit hole to go down is liqueurs and aperitifs, amaros, different things like that. There's a lot more fancy drinks, especially when you get into the rum and the gin world, which is not my forte yet. I'm very much more of a whiskey or a rum cocktail, even tequila a little bit more so than the other last 2 here, but play around. I like tropical, I like fruity, I also like sweet old fashions. That's my wheelhouse. Gins, I made an old fashioned with gin that's really good, especially the Sugarfield gin I have here. But that's just me. Play around, find what you like. Let me know your recipes. Please comment on Instagram, send me a message, whatever. I want to know your homemade cocktail recipes. Please share that with me. If you have any other questions, please let me know. This, of course, has been brought to you by our sponsor, which is the Bourbon Society of Baton Rouge. We just launched the Louisiana Bourbon Fest. So get your tickets now. That's louisianabourbonfest.com. Other than that, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Sorry for the delay. I'll be more consistent, I promise. Thank you. Cheers.